Just hours after Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc met with his U.S. counterpart in Washington, the Americans announced a new set of sweeping tariffs that are set to impact Canada, one of 60 countries the States is going after again.
New U.S. tariffs on Canada. What it means for everyday life. If you've ever bought lumber to fix something at home, picked up furniture at a store, or driven a car, this story is for you. Because the latest move from Washington could quietly push the price of all those things higher. And it's not as complicated as it sounds. The U.S. government just announced a proposal to place a 10% tariff on a range of goods coming from Canada. A tariff, in simple terms, is a fee charged when products cross a border. When it goes up, businesses that import those products typically pass the cost on to consumers, meaning things get more expensive. This proposal is part of a larger investigation the U.S. has been running, looking at whether countries are doing enough to keep products made with forced labor out of their supply chains. According to the U.S., Canada has the rules on paper, but isn't enforcing them well enough. Canada is one of about 60 countries caught up in this. Now, before we go further, this is still a proposal. It is not law yet. A final decision is expected sometime around mid-July. Here's the part that actually matters to most people. Roughly 85% of Canadian goods sold to the U.S. are protected under an existing trade agreement and would not be affected. That's a significant chunk. But what could be affected includes things like softwood lumber, certain furniture, and cars made primarily in Canada. Softwood lumber already carries heavy duties that push its price up by around 50%. If this new 10% tariff is added on top, that number could reach 60%. Why does lumber matter to you? Because it's a basic building material. When lumber gets more expensive, construction follows. Home builders pay more. Renovation projects cost more. And eventually, that gets passed to the people buying or renting the homes. Furniture works the same way. If Canadian-made furniture becomes more costly to import, retailers may raise prices on shelves or shift to cheaper alternatives, which can affect quality. Beyond consumer prices, there are workers and industries directly in the line of fire. Lumber mills, furniture manufacturers, and auto plants in Canada employ real people. If U.S. buyers start sourcing from elsewhere because Canadian goods become too expensive, those businesses face pressure. That can mean reduced hours, layoffs, or closures in the communities that depend on them. For the steel and aluminum sectors, there's a small piece of good news buried in the fine print. The new 10% tariff would not stack on top of the existing steel and aluminum tariffs, which are already as high as 50% on some items. So those industries wouldn't face a compounding hit, at least under this proposal as written. For goods not covered by the trade agreement, the situation is different. Those already carry a 10% global tariff. This measure could push that to 20%. That's a meaningful jump for businesses and eventually for the people buying what those businesses sell. The two sides are still talking. Canadian and U.S. trade officials met recently for about 2 hours. The Canadian side described the mood as cautiously optimistic, though no concrete agreements were announced and no formal talks are yet scheduled. There's a broader trade agreement deadline coming up on July 1st. Both sides have acknowledged that deadline will likely be missed. Negotiations involving Mexico, where there are reportedly more unresolved issues, are also happening at the same time. What that means in practical terms, things are still fluid. This proposed tariff could be modified, delayed, or dropped entirely before mid-July, or it could go forward as written. We won't know for certain until then. It's also worth noting that past U.S. tariff threats against Canada have sometimes not materialized. So while this is worth watching, it isn't a done deal. Trade policy rarely feels personal until it shows up in the price of a 2x4, a couch, or a car. That's the gap this story sits in, between a government announcement and your everyday spending. We'll keep watching how this develops. And as always, the goal here is just to help you understand what's happening and what it might actually mean for your life.